hope it's been evident that one, I've enjoyed being with you. It's just wonderful to be with colleagues, talking shop about this curious vocation. I also hope it's been evident that my prejudice is that preaching is the most important thing you do, of all the important things you do. And I hope it's evident that I believe that for two reasons. One having to do with the kind of God we've got. This is the way this God gets what this God wants. This God is in the business of revealing to us God is not who you thought God was. This is the truth about God. Two, I also believe preaching is the most important thing you do, because I just think we're in a time where the straightforward, simple, got a great quote from Luther here about don't clamor after novelty in preaching. Preach it straight, preach it direct, simple. I believe we're in a time when it's almost as if the culture is restoring the wonder of one person just standing up and testifying, witnessing to the truth, like John the Baptist pointing to this crucified one and saying that is who God is for you. And that, again, to say that, I just think you could make a better case for the catechism in New York 2018 than you could in Wittenberg in 1600. So that moment where the oddness of the gospel can be appropriated, appreciated, relished in a way maybe that it couldn't during our quote glory years. Some of you are paying dearly in the buildings you got to live in from the glory years, where they overbuilt and they overpromised, and but still it can be a good time for doing that. And I think preaching is also the most important thing you do, because it's good use of your time, and you're with more people. I was surprised to hear my friend Stanley Arwad say, after he's an Episcopalian, and just saying he said, why don't preachers use the pulpit to lead more? And I said, gosh, I'm kind of surprised you say that, because you're opposed to utilitarianism and instrumentalism. And he said, yeah, but we're all there, the biggest gathering of the week, and we're all quiet. And so if you got something to say, if you got a vision, let's hear it. And it's important to articulate it. I think the world belongs to whoever can talk well about the world. And many times, some of the best work we do is when somebody, Fred Craddock says, when somebody comes out and says, oh, you really preached to me today, preacher. Probably what they mean is, you really preached for me today, preacher. You really articulated in a way that I couldn't. Longings that I've had, or what I so need to hear, or so we've had a lot of training in that articulation. And I think we're in a time when we can recover the story. As I mentioned yesterday, I think if you're in a congregation of people around my age, there is a sense which a sermon can be a short, remembering of what we already know, a reference, a hint toward that which is in our consciousness. If you're in a younger congregation, if you're in a congregation that's been doing a great job on evangelism, there's a good chance your sermon will need to be longer. You'll need to go back over it. And I was in some Martin Luther King weekend observance, and you had all these, mostly white Duke students. We had an African-American preacher, and he got rolling, and he said, "You know what it's like to walk down that Jericho Road?" I said, they don't know. They don't get it, that's an illusion. And you look up and your last hope is moving down the road to you, and you're wounded and you're bleeding. And I said, they don't get those subtle illusions. This is where I envy African-American preachers being in a church where people, maybe a higher percentage actually know the story. But even there, we got people who don't know the basic stuff, the basic story. But what a wonderful time to recover, for us to recover the joy. Preached on Matthew 20 and the laborers in the vineyard. A student, usher, says to me, "Where do you get these stories?" Growing up in South Carolina, I guess. Well, I was troubled by the one today. That's just not the way to treat people. Some have worked 1 hour, and others have worked all day, and they're all paid the same. That's not right. That's not justice. And I said, wait, that's not original with me. That's Matthew. I said, Matthew? It's a book in the Bible. And I said, what's your religious background? Just praying she wouldn't say Methodist. And well, we went to, I think, a Presbyterian church or something when I was a kid, I don't know. And I said, well, wow, I envy you, because I just preached on that absurd story. But nobody got the absurdity, including me. And just for your information, the man that told that story was murdered just a couple of weeks later for that story. And wow, I envy you. And so we may live in a time when the sheer otherness of the gospel that I struggle with people who think they already know God, and they think they got it just because of their bourgeois and their nice little lives seem fairly orderly, and they got the right social attitudes, which maybe is an appeal for evangelism. And I wonder if the role of pastor, when it becomes kind of keeping house of those saints delivered to us from another generation of hardworking preachers, when pastoring is limited to that, I think we're at a time when pastors, we got to find ways to get out. We got to find ways to join Jesus in His work in the world and mix it up with, and to help the flock get out. Some of you have described to me the neighborhoods where your church is planted, and maybe the neighborhood began as an ethnic neighborhood, of Lutherans, and they were all there, and Lutherans got to America and found out that America is out to destroy Lutherans, so they got together, and they created their own schools and their own civic organizations and all to help Lutherans stay Lutheran and to resist the lures of this world, this culture. Well, that's changed, but there's a good chance in that neighborhood now you've got a lot of people for whom the American dream is not working, people whose lives are in the grip of certain principalities and powers. Well, it's a good time to be the one that names our masters and the one that says, even though the world has numerous ways of showing you're nothing, that's a lie. And in here, you are God's own. You are royalty. You're God's answer to what's wrong with the world. And God's got plans for you. Got an assignment. And how can I equip you to step up to that? David Bentley Hart says, when most atheists he talks to, the God that they don't believe in is not the God that Christians believe in anyway. And it's so hard to cut through that because of the arrogance of thinking, I know God well enough to reject God. I think for us, the sermon becomes a great time of recovery, rediscovery of that God, and I think the way to do that is by attending to the biblical text, to submit to the text, to begin with the text, to let the text judge our communication, and rather to crank the text down to the limitations of our uninformed people, rather to give people the equipment they need to be listeners to the gospel. What else was the catechism, postals, and these Lutheran mechanisms, but to say, we're going to train you, even you, we're going to train you to be able to listen to a sermon without despising God for it. Okay? And we're going to teach you some new words and some new ways of thinking. We're going to teach you appropriate questions to ask in sermon. And by the way, all communication requires training to get it. The trouble is there's some communication, like on Fox News, that is so backed up by this economy, by the world's mechanisms, that it appears to be normal. It appears to be natural. It appears to be American. Different. A word about how I think I try to preach. I don't always do this and sometimes I'm the last one to know. And by the way, in moving toward certain practical concerns in preaching, it isn't like you've got theories up here and then you've got practice here. It isn't like you've got ideas here and then over here you've got technique, delivery, presentation. In preaching, it's all together. The delivery is the idea many times. Or many times the idea is invalidated by the delivery. Or at our best, whatever ideas you think you found, it's Mark invents a literary form unknown in the world. Sort of like biography, sort of like history, but not quite. More really of a sermon than a literary device called the gospel. Because there was something about Jesus Christ that demanded a new form to talk about him. There was something about the truth that Jesus Christ embodies and articulates that required parables to do the work. And that's why when we read the Gospels, we're with a colleague who is saying, how can I adequately represent this peculiar truth to these people? How can I do that? How can I interest them in the truth? How can I grab them and engage them and entertain them? And so we're in the presence of preachers. Well, I think, and this is indebted, as I remember, to Tom Long, but the preacher, in service to the congregation, goes to the biblical text, hoping to make a discovery. And then you announce that discovery to the congregation. Now notice most of the work that's done there is done earlier. You go to the biblical text, not seeking simply confirmation in what we've always thought, but you go there hoping to make a discovery. That can be a challenge when, we've been dealing with preachers with this stuff. So I've been to the common lectionary, I think, 7 times, the whole 3-year, so it can't go down. Luckily, the Holy Spirit gets in there and says, by the way, that sermon you preached 3 years ago, wrong. Look here, let me show you something you never noticed here. That's our hope. But you go to the biblical text hoping to make a discovery. Discoveries are interesting. Discoveries will find a way to be shared. It's of the nature of discovery that you want to share it. Hey, look what I found while I was just walking through Matthew again. And look at this. And discoveries engage people. We're someone saying, hey, I have seen something you may not have seen. Let me show it to you. And that'll attract a crowd. And you announce it to the congregation. John Calvin said sermons are twice born, once in the study and then in the pulpit. And you see what you're doing, you're taking the congregation in your sermon on the same journey you made in the study. You're letting them in on some of the fun. I looked at this and I thought, that? No? Well, maybe it's that. No? Can it be that? And you're letting them have some of the joy of discovery and recovery of that surprise, that oddness. Luke's got a string of parables there, and one is the kingdom of God is like a woman, and she takes I think 6 measures of wheat, and she works it up into bread, but she takes the yeast and she puts the yeast into the dough, and it's like that. Well, the kingdom of God starts small, and not many of us here, but that's the way God works, small to larger. Just a little bit of yeast goes a long way. Well, I do some study of that passage. The commentator notes a string of 7 parables. This is the only one with a woman in the parable. Okay, the kingdom of God is like a woman. And by the way, this much wheat is the equivalent of 3 bushels of flour. The kingdom of God is like a woman that takes 3 bushels of flour. A very large woman. A woman with really good biceps. And she works up that dough into enough bread to feed the entire community. Another commentator notes the yeast there. The yeast, it says she hides the yeast in the dough. Hiding? That's a weird word to find in the kitchen. Hiding? Why would she hide? It's like a woman that takes all this dough and sneaks and puts that yeast in there and then feeds the whole. Commentator says, don't think of that as a prepackaged dried yeast that we use for bread. this is the slimy green stuff that you keep over in a jar on the side of the kitchen that keeps fermenting and the yeast and the bacteria, and it's that. Israel uses unleavened bread for the holiest days, but Paul says don't celebrate with leaven. This old leaven infects. Well, I made a discovery with the help of a commentator, and when has the kingdom of God come to me? Through the wrong person. Somebody on the margin. When has somebody had to hide some yeast into the lump, and it is germinated and produced? Has anybody here been saved by somebody that the world considers on the margins, out? I remember in preaching that sermon, I said, one reason a lot of you are involved in our ministry with the homeless and the people who live on the street around this church, I think one reason you're involved in it is you have the good sense to know they are right now about the only thing validating us as a Christian church. If we lose them, we're the Men's Garden Club. I mean, we're Rotary. They become the ones who put to us the best questions that it takes us weeks to deal with. They're the ones that we ask ourselves, how can we move from doing good, loving things for them to getting them with us at the Lord's table? They may make us, anyway. Sometimes I confess that I put too much emphasis on that discovery thing. And I look for the weird in a biblical text. And I get excited about the weird. Today we shall do a familiar parable, the prodigal son, but we shall do it from the standpoint of the fatted calf. I know you've all heard this before, and I want to get a little weird here. And we may be in a time when people need the truth reasserted. We need to come together and once again say, this story is not only beautiful, it's true. It's our truth. And even though the world doesn't answer to this story, it doesn't. It's still ours. It's good to hear the old story once again, and truthful. I would just say that I envy you as Lutherans, and that you bring to the text a wonderful theological structure that a kind of a system, although I much prefer Luther to like Calvin. Calvin gets it way too systematized in an unbiblical way. And I like that, as I understand it, Luther, I get into this in the book, but he has basically the same Augustinian doctrine of election that Calvin is working with, but he has a good sense not to talk about it. And he has the wonderful humility, which I don't often think of Luther and humility together, but he has the humility not to work it into 30 pages on predestination as God's eternal, sovereign, secret decree. Luther doesn't do that. He's a pastor and he's preaching. So, but I think that's wonderful. There are limitations of that. It means that there's stuff that you can't fit it into that structure. Certain texts are a challenge for you. It does also mean that some of the texts could be muted for you as you attempt to, like a friend of mine said, he learned in seminary, every sermon should have law and gospel. You preach a sermon on law, you got to get the gospel before you end the sermon. Now, my problem with that is that I just don't think every text has law and gospel. I think some texts. Wait a minute. But it's fun to find gospel in apparent law, and it's also fun to find, this is Wesley, but finding law in apparent, straight, running naked through the streets, grace, gospel. And yet, I think in the present moment, sometimes we've got our hands full preaching one text out of the lectionary offerings. I generally go with one text thinking, gosh, it's a university audience. They're ignorant. I've got to keep it simple. I've got to keep it straight. This is all new information to them. So I'm going to stick with this one text. But I love the kind of theological test that tests, and I know you do more than law and gospel, but that you put to a text. I'm troubled in my ecclesial tradition. We don't have as a good a body of that we bring to the text, because everybody brings something to the text, and I sure approve of bringing like Lutheran theology to the text more than I like, bringing my good old white American stuff to the text. I think I want to stop there, and I've tried to affirm what you're giving your life to, and would like to talk about what you'd like to talk about, and maybe some agenda that you've brought here that I want to be sure we have some time for that. So I'd like to do that. I'm also assuming many of you know more than I do about this. I've been in awe, as some of you have described your specific situation to me. Yes?
A long time ago, Joe Schittler
blessed memory,
taught me how to make a judgment of a sermon.
Okay.
He says,
What did Joe Schittler say?
Joe Schittler saying, if it's true, if what you said is true, that's enough.
Wow. I love that. I mean, again, that seems very Lutheran. If it's true, that's enough. Or as Jeremiah said, here's God say, if they were here or they refuse to hear, at least tell our prophet has been in town, Willimon. I am troubled that we preachers, I think, become overly concerned about reaction, response, the listeners. Some of you, said to me, well, we only worship about 50 on Sunday morning, and I said, 50? Wow, that was messing with my stereotypes of Manhattan. You've rescued 50? Wow, that's good work, not bad. That's amazing. Well, but I think too, I need to be more in love with the truth, his name is Jesus Christ, than I am with my people. And I don't do that because as well as I'd like, because I'd like you to like me, I'd like you to agree with me, I'd like you to say, that was wonderful. I changed my life completely. Thank you. You'll probably still be a white racist after this, but go ahead. I like to believe I've had impact, but I must never believe that the impact is the spring test. So just standing up in a culture of lies and speaking the truth becomes quite an achievement. So Thank you, Joseph Sittler. Yes?
Mark Gerson from Manhattan. And I appreciated what you said about the Calvin quote of that's born twice. And I was giving some advice to a young preacher because it's also not just what we say, but how we say it.
Amen.
And he was, in a sense, recording what he had done in the study, as opposed to reliving for the people what he had done in the study. So that it could be born again. And I would say that it's actually maybe born a third time, once in the study, once in the pulpit, and then once in the hearts and minds of the listener. Right? And so that's what. So then we become midwives because we're trying to help it be born again in the hearts and minds of the listener.
Here's a good opportunity for me to say, I wish some of you would invite me to come to your church in a way that I could see a maximum number of off-Broadway plays while I am preaching for you. But thank you. You know, preaching is performance, and it is. It's interesting. People have done work on this, on performance. Isn't it interesting how many of our metaphors for the theater are negative? Like, that was just a show, or he's putting on an act, or, well, it's almost like saying to Mark, come on, Mark, get to the truth. All these silly little stories, why do we care where Jesus was on this day? Can we cut through the stories and get to the truth? Well, no, I mean, the story is the truth. The gospel is a dramatic-like presentation. And also, I will say that in the Joseph Sittler quote, when you're an actor, and I've only acted once in the last few years, I was the preacher in the rock musical Tommy. The students got me into who is a pedophile, and anyway. An actor wants to deliver to the audience. The actor wants the audience to have a good experience. But kind of first of all, as I understand it, the actor wants to follow the script. The actor wants to make the script come alive, but the actor does not improvise in the sense of messing with Shakespeare, but improvises with the words as the actor has memorized them. The actor tries to memorize it word for word. I like that mix, and I would think the actor would be hurt if people come out and say, "Ooh, that was boring," or "Wow, it was a long night. Thought it'd never end." On the other hand, the actor also wants to honor the genius of the author. One of my greatest experiences in the theater was a few years ago. We went to see Mark Rylance, I think his name, in Twelfth Night. And it was one of those incredible experiences because they did it. It was all men, and they come out, and the actors come out in the street clothes, and they put on their costumes and makeup on stage in front of the audience, and they banter with the audience. And this guy's putting on these artificial breasts, and said, "Would someone like to strap me in here?" And you're sitting there, and they're laughing about it, they're talking about it. Then the play starts. And these people that you've seen arrive in street clothes and put on all this stuff, suddenly you're drawn into it. And to me, Twelfth Night has no edifying intent. It's a kind of a farce. But it's kind of gender bending and mixed identities, which say, wait a minute, this guy playing this role is a guy. And yet, look, he's a believable woman. And as you know, that play ends with the actors Shakespeare has them come out and say, now this is just a play. We did not mean to offend anybody. It's just a play, okay? That's all this is a play. Well, the audience was kind of saying, shut up, get off the... No, it was more than a play. It was something has happened in my world. I am different because of this. And I love the kind of genius of saying, now, you're not supposed to take any of this seriously. It's just a fun night. No, something serious has happened to me in this farm. So it was a great... But I wonder if I'm attracted to it partly because, in a sense, at my best, I do some of that in my preaching. And it isn't fair at the end to say, now, wait a minute. I was just preaching. I was just throwing out some ideas for you. And you can pick what you want, okay? And I didn't want to mess with you. I just wanted to throw it out there. And, but thank you. And, in fact, I think probably the major difficulty in seminary is teaching the performative aspects of preaching, issues of delivery and style, our ideas, get your ideas right. And one problem is most of us, I don't think, develop our voice, our style, our delivery until 10 years into preaching. It takes some time to be comfortable with yourself and to know how you come across, but that's so important. If you notice, most lay people, at least in my tradition, if you ask them, what did you think about that sermon? Their comments are invariably about issues of delivery and issues of, like, the preacher just didn't seem to be engaged or, I don't know, the preacher just didn't seem to be sincere. And I said, well, wait a minute. You're judging the sincere from, it's kind of what we do. The preacher's got to be present there. But gosh, I envy you with the dramatic training. Yes?
I relate to several things that you said. The idea of discovery. 15 times through the lectionary.
Wow.
I'm so amazed every time when I write a sermon that I feel like I never read or preached on text before.
Amazing.
Undoubtedly have, especially at Reformation Sunday.
Yeah. and by the way, I think that's one of the great challenges of preaching is the literature itself is thick. And I think we modern people generally don't like thick descriptions of the world. We like it to be linear and simple, but Scripture is hardly ever that. Here's someone saying, hey, trust me, I've been through this stuff dozens and dozens of times. A text can still surprise me. Yeah. So the fact that you didn't get it today, that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that was the one thing. Another thought was that I get to preach 4 times in my congregation on the same weekend. And since I don't use a manuscript, I really get a sense of what you're talking about, the sermon developing as a...
Wow, yeah.
So by 11 o'clock, that's the one that I
Did you use a manuscript earlier in preaching?
No.
So you've been non-manuscript?
No, I use outlines at the beginning.
Yeah. And I guess I kind of do outlines now, but, and I was talking about this with one of you about having the experience of one Sunday in my church, not using any notes and just going up there full frontal, delivering it. And so I launched into my sermon, which was shorter than usual. And I was taken back. The people were all intently focused on me. And it was disarming. And made me want to say, I might not be right on all of this, so I don't want you to take it way too seriously. I never went back into the pulpit again in that church because there was an immediacy. And I tell the students, I was taught to use a manuscript. I think that is a very good discipline, particularly, well, I was going to say particularly in the early years of preaching, but one could make a case you need a manuscript carefully thought out more in your last years of preaching, when you slip into platitudes and cliches and all, to cleanse some of that. But one trouble, you can watch a sermon, and every time the speaker looks down like this, you lose something. You lose some contact, you lose some energy. So matters, I think these artists, these actors can teach us a lot, and comedians, and yes. Here, wait, excuse me, we're going. Yeah, it's a question.
I just wanted to confirm something that you had said in regards to the story of the Good Samaritan. When I moved from a mining town in western Pennsylvania to East Cleveland, Ohio, the poorest community in Ohio and the black community, in my Bible study, asked the people, who are you in the story? Of course, I've always wanted to be the Good Samaritan, even though we Lutherans don't do good works, but that's what I wanted. Yeah, in fact, everybody in the group, in our community, saw themselves as a person beaten and left there. And it was a very transforming time for me. It especially helped me with the next parable that you talked about the next week, because I'm a middle child. And as a middle child, I'm never sure which to side with in that story.
Yeah.
And I've really come up to understand that I side with those who came late.
Interesting. Isn't that wonderful how though the Lord uses, like, I'm a middle child, and all that gets used in preaching, all that is put out there. I remember a student asked me at one point, the question was, like, why do you preach the way you preach? And I kind of heard it as, how do you preach the way you preach? And I said, well, I was conceived, as best I can calculate, the day that my father got out of prison for bank fraud, and then my father stayed around a couple of years, and then he was ordered off by the extended Southern family, was ordered out. So I was raised by a mother, a single-parent mother. We lived out in the country, alone out there and everything. I think much of my life has been, an attempt to get people to like me and to approve of me. And I've always felt a little kind of illegitimate, I guess, down deep and everything. So the student says, I mean, do you use note cards? So, but it is, being a middle child, hey, Lord can use that. That can be an interpretive. It can also be a way of connecting with the congregation. And when it was mentioned last night about interpreting the Good Samaritan story, I thought, gosh, in Duke Chapel, I really learned with guest preachers. I really learned how Martin Luther King was right. I mean, King preaches that on one occasion where the man in the ditch is America. And the last hope for salvation of white America is the black church. And the black church is the despised Samaritan.
Say it again.
What was it? Oh, so, all right. So, that's what I've heard of that sermon. The man in the ditch is the white church, who's bleeding and dying and on its last leg. And the one coming down the road is the despised outsider Samaritan, who is the last hope for healing. And he, as I remember, he said in that sermon to the black church, you have a responsibility to try to lift up your brothers. Jesus expects you to bind up these wounds, and it was just kind of amazing. My people love the story of the Good Samaritan, that because We're white, powerful, resourced people, and we have a responsibility to try to lift up the less fortunate and to help them. I have my master's degree, and again, in our interpretation, it's so hard to find the right place in the story. James Sanders used to say that's the hardest thing in biblical interpretation, to find yourself in the story. You're not in the pulpit in Nazareth beating up these conservative Jews. No, you're in the congregation as our Lord preaches to you. Where are you in the story of the Good Samaritan? Where are you? I remember preaching on Mary and Martha and Jesus, and talking about how Jesus shows up at night. These two women receive him in, and a woman said to me at the end of the service, if you're not a woman living alone, and there's I would think it's hard for you to understand what it's like when there's a knock on the door at midnight and there's a man at your door. Wow, the courage of those two women. And I said, I could use that. I can work that up in the sermon next time, but great insight. Or I'm preaching on a very traditional sermon on marriage, and a male Duke undergraduate comes out and says, have you ever promised yourself who you would be and what you would do and then disappointed yourself? Has that ever happened to you? And I realized that unintentionally I had projected something that I didn't mean to project, and to hear that from his perspective, again, don't ever try the gospel if you're not a pastor busy mixing it up with real living people. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Well, I'm sorry. Here we need to. I should call the microphone on people. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. As you know, most of the people in this room preach every Sunday, so we have the disadvantage that we can't hear the real good preachers preach. And just to follow up, we talked about performative. And so I'm just curious if you have any advice. We look to some of the great preachers. I consider you one of the best that's around. And Tom Long, who you mentioned, your style, your technique. I'm thrilled with your humor that you use in sermons. But what would you recommend to someone else? And the follow-up to that is, who do you think are the best preachers that are out there today?
First, I just say, I think you should preach as you preach, and not as you ought to preach. That you, God, for reasons known to the Lord, has called you to preach. And as bishop, one of the fun things was I'd meet pastors and I'd think, Lord, what were you thinking? Lord, I mean, the grammar alone should disqualify. But then to discover, wow, God is using that person in ways that God couldn't use me. And I think preachers have got to have kind of self-confidence that God knew what God was doing when God called us. And you know some of your limitations and all, but it's like I sin boldly, and I just hear the Lord say, "Stop it! Get on out there." And I'll tell you what to say. Don't prepare when they drag you in the law courts and all. I'll give you a script. Get on in there. You'll be helped. On the second thing, for me, the web has exploded preaching, good preaching. And When I was a young preacher, I used to have to get up on Sunday morning and take the cassette recorder and stick it up against the radio on the Protestant hour and hear Edmund Steinley. Some of you may have studied with Edmund Steinley. But I had heard preaching like this. And, began a sermon last week in the city. Police delivered a baby in a stairwell of a tenement. 2 hours later, the police encountered a stick-up man in a convenience store. He was shot dead in the act of robbing the store. At the end of the day, both the baby and the stick-up man were unnamed. Anonymous birth, anonymous death in the city. What's he mean? And, and then I would play that tape on my cassette when I'd go to the hospital, riding around town, and try to have a Brooklyn accent if I could. It would work. But the web, I just think, it is amazing. The people are on the web preaching and calling that up, and it is amazing watching the gospel make its way in the world. And preachers so different than I am. I just wonder if maybe the day of what kind of great preachers has ended. That now it's this vast company of, and you got to define what does great mean. What is? I know I was in a church. They call themselves a church. They meet in a bar in Brooklyn, as I remember. Their pastor is Jay Baker, the son of Tammy Faye and Jim Baker. Some of you remember. And the service consists in the bar of Jay preaching for 1 hour. No music. And no response, no talk back. Jay preaches for an hour, and then that's it. And I was thinking, wow, Jesus is amazing. I also think preaching is changing, and one problem, like when I'm in a seminary classroom, and maybe the median age is 26, 27, 28 at our seminary. And I tell them, I'm going to share with you what I think worked for me. I'm going to share with you ministry as I did it in the church that I received. And I want you to learn from that. I want you to take what can be helpful to you. On the other hand, about 50% of what I say is going to be worthless. Because you can't serve the same church I serve. That's just not going to be possible. We have a living God, God of the living, not of the dead. And you're not me. And so learning to preach is hard. And I remember being a student at Yale Divinity School, and William Sloane Coffin gets up. In the first sermon, I heard Coffin preach, and he said, all the dirty, filthy, pornographic books ever written are not as dirty as 1 minute in the mind of General William Westmoreland. Wow, I'm hooked. Teach me how to do that. And I remember during a sermon, often is in a sermon, and this young man stands up and screams out, "That man is an apostate! That man is preaching lies!" And everybody just gasped. And Coffin said, "Son, I've just begun the sermon. How, in the first 10 minutes of the sermon, would you come to a conclusion that I'm lying?" Now, if you'll allow me to finish, then you'll be capable of making an intelligent judgment on the sermon. And the guy said, okay. And I said, Lord, I want to be like that when I grow up. I want to be able to. And so, to me, from what I've seen, it's important to choose your mentors wisely. I think women in ministry have had a challenge because there's been too few women's voices. That is changing. And I've noticed that, I told Barbara Brown-Taylor one time, I said, Lord, I hope you're right. Because you got a monopoly on women preaching, and all my women students want to preach like you. He said, no, that's terrible. No, that's changing. I think also they're ancillary to that. It's important to imitate. In classical rhetoric, you spent 12 years memorizing other people's speeches before you dare attempt any of your own. John Wesley, when he would commission his circuit riders, would hand them a copy of 52 of his sermons. And he said, preach these before you attempt any of your own. Okay? And that was his instruction in preaching, was you learn to preach. And I think all of us learn to preach through imitation, modeling. However, that then leads to a freedom of interpretation and a realization of your particular voice and what you bring to the task. I suppose actors learning to act, I mean, you don't start out by saying, why don't you just do a tragedy? No, you follow the words, but as we've all seen, I've had my mind on King Lear because, well, I mean, look at me. And I've listened online. What a gift! 5 different productions of Lear. All of them are so radically different that it's almost like you're not watching the same play. And all of them say different. They're using the same script. So I think finding your own voice is important. Behind that, and I say this after, being privileged to teach a number of women, I think at the bedrock of good preaching is vocation. A conviction somewhere down in you that God really means this to be. That somehow through word and sacrament, God is making God's appeal through us. And probably some of us would be better preachers if our vocation had been more contested. I know some women that I think part of the power of their preaching is that down deep somewhere there's a sense and their memories that there are people out there who don't really feel affirmative that this person should be articulating the faith in the pulpit. And I love to see God use that. And I'm thinking, I'd be better if I had one time had the experience of standing up and preach and people say, oh, a white male, oh, careful, be careful, I don't want to hear this. They run the country and the only people you can hear, I don't need to hear. I think I'd be a better preacher if I felt that way. Or I remember the student who said to me, I didn't like your preaching at first. I was suspicious of you. And I said, why? And he said, well, isn't it obvious? You're paid by Duke University. You're part of the problem. And he said, but I love the way you manage, every so often break free of that kind of enslavement. Wow, good. So, again, preaching is so wonderfully incarnational. And my wife's grandmother was the first ordained woman in South Carolina Methodism, the legendary Bessie Parker. And she had snow white hair. She always wore a clerical collar. and serves some of the meanest Methodist churches in South Carolina. But you know, you get up there and her preaching style, when she would come out there and say, today, I think what Jesus wants to talk with you about is. And she would talk to them, and I'd look at this congregation full of racist fools, and they're all saying, yes, ma'am. And she says, and I know you want to be better, don't you? And you want to be all God wants you to be. I believe, God, you did not choose to be here this morning. I think God put you here this morning. Because God has got something that only you can do for you. You are to be a light to the world. And they're all, yes, okay, Grandma, yeah, I'll do that. And it was just wonderful to see that work. Where's our microphones? Are you good? Oh, you got it? Good, you're holding it. Good.
It's like Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, well, yeah, hold the stick.
Thank you for this. Can you tolerate one more comment on law and gospel?
I was expecting it. Go ahead. We're going 15 minutes. Yeah.
So I remember being taught by my mentor that you don't need to locate the law in the text because it is our lived reality every day. The anfechtung that we experience, the fear, the anxiety, the conflicted conscience, it is our everyday lived reality. So maybe because it's Halloween, this seemed appropriate today. There's somewhere Luther wrote, I can't tell you where, but he has this bit about the law is when you are walking in a quiet evening outside and rustling of a leaf strikes fear in your heart. That's the law.
Huh.
Yeah. So it's more of a function, something, right? So, but what you said about the gospel, that we can't tell it to ourselves, that is the really helpful part. Because I know the law every day.
Wow. That is, what a wonderful insight. And yeah, that's, I need you teaching at New Divinity School. That, rustle of the leaves. And it's just like I don't think my subjectivity, my interiority needs any more encouragement from you. Okay? I think I need ecstasy, ecstasis. Stand outside myself. I need taking responsibility. I was at a funeral recently, and the pastor seemed unaware that the deceased was a Christian who loved the church well. And so he got up and he said, she was a wonderful grandmother. He looked at the children and said, she loved you. And I said, wow. Take that, all of you unloving grandmothers. Good. There's a grandmother out there who actually loved her grandchildren. Wow, what a moral achievement. I thought, so sad, she's dead. She's dead. And that's a horrible, devastating loss. And the best you got is she loved her grandchildren. And show me anywhere Jesus gives a rip about that. To me, that's kind of a kind of thing about, hey, now here's the law. Here's what it takes for you to have a good life and to live that. Also, we were talking about white supremacy yesterday, and I guess, having been raised to be a white supremacist, which I think that applies to you when you're white, even if you're not in South Carolina. Can I get an amen? I'll say that is so deep in my thinking and willing and acting. And when I think of the earnest effort I think I put into it and all the privileges I've had to deal with that, it's occurred to me that I'm I'm not going to be rid of that demon. That I will probably take that into eternity, that depth of sin that is in its unknowing, unacknowledged sin, the hurt that I have caused, not intending to hurt, all that. Gospel is needed. And the weird thing is, you know, when I get gospel, I'm actually capable of some amazing responses. But it kind of first begins in who is God? And what kind of God do we have? And Luther's criticism of latter theology, that our theology becomes do this, I do this, good, you're right, you got it, you're fixed. And I had a PhD MDiv student that I got to know, Missouri Synod Lutheran, and I don't have the antipathy toward Missouri Synod Lutherans that you do, but and I asked him, I said, have you enjoyed your first days of medical residency in the Duke Hospital? And he said, well, you know, you'd be interested in this, but I thank God I'm a Missouri Synod Lutheran. And he said, I don't know if people ought to be studying medicine who are not Missouri Synod Lutheran. I said, what? And he said, well, do you know much about Missouri Synod Lutheran? Because, you know, we're real big on sin. And you're a sinner when you start out, and you're kind of a worse sinner when you finish. Because the stuff you didn't know was sin, turns out it's sin, and you never get over being a sinner. And the only way you can be damned is to think you're not damned. And I said, what? And he said, so, here, when we have a patient who died, we have a morbidity and mortality conference, which is a meeting of all the people involved in the patient's care. And we talk about the death, and people are always so defensive. And they said, we followed a procedure that any medical center in this country would follow a protocol. We did everything right. The surgery was perfect. It was just, and the patient died. We didn't want that, did we? We didn't start out wanting that, but that's what we got. Well, that can be blamed on us, and don't say that in front of a lawyer, you know. And he said, I have never been around people who had to be good. And he said, they're dangerous. And he said, so when I come to the medical center in the morning, I look at that vast array of buildings, and I say, you know, a lot of good's going to happen here today. But a lot of bad will happen here. And we won't know the bad until later, when we can't fix it. And the worst of it is, we didn't intend for it to be bad. And it's still bad. Lord have mercy. Yeah, well, so I'm thinking that I just still hope there's some way for me not to have to submit to the grace of Jesus Christ, you know, to make it. I just still hope I'm going to get things together. One thing that helps me, though, is being around Lutherans. And it also, by the way, speaking of race, the morning after the election, I was walking in the hall looking depressed, and I passed an African-American student whom I enjoy, and he said, hey, Doc, how you doing? I said, well, terrible. He said, oh, you're not feeling well? And I said, after last night, after the election, it's just horrible. I don't know, I was so depressed, I didn't want to. I'm ashamed to see you. I'm ashamed of big work. I'm ashamed of the country. He said, huh? And I said, you're not feeling that way? And he said, no. He said, you disappoint me a little bit. Now, America has elected a white, racist, male fool to be president. Is this your first time? with tears in my eyes, I said, you know, Jesus has put you up to this. Jesus has sent you here this morning to minister to me. You can cut class for the rest of the day. Your work is done. Go in peace. But you know, I thought, thank you, church, for putting me in contact with people that sisters and brothers, and you remind me, hey, you know, when you say, hey, America, it's time to unite again. Wait, again? What is, no. Again, I do think we Christians have a witness that we can share. That the amazing thing that you may not be getting better morally. You may not be able sufficiently to be truthful about yourself, but luckily that's not what this faith is about. And what a message! I envied the Lutheran campus ministry because I said, "Wow, to be at Duke University and be preaching." So like right there, I mean, this to be preaching law and gospel here. I said, wow, because all these little rascals they're good at law. I mean, and I used to ridicule them in sermons and say, you know, your friends that screamed up and down Main Street in a car on Saturday nights, that were imbibing mind-altering substances on the weekends, they didn't get in Duke. You did. And because you pulled that off, you actually think now that you're going to be able to stay married, that you're going to do all kinds of achievements and everything. And but I believe that's a lie, and that you're more inept than you know. Yeah. And that's good because we've got a Savior that only came for losers. Right now you're alienated from him because you're in a bad neighborhood here, but if you ever become a loser, call me collect. You know, on that night when you're 55 and life has smacked you, and you're not far from the kingdom. You have turned, you become as a little child. Jesus says no adults get in this kingdom. You can be little, small, and you're not that way now, but if you live long enough, you will be. And surprise, you're close to the kingdom. Teaching a class on Jesus, Birmingham Southern College, there was this guy came in there and he said, are you going to try to convert us? And I said, I'd like to, but I'm a Methodist and we don't know how to do that. But we used to do it. He says, well, good, because I'm pissed. I grew up Baptist, and I said, oh, another angry Baptist. Yeah, take a seat. And, so he turned out as a good student. We went through the class, and at the end of class, I said to them, you know, I wonder if this class is a mistake, because... and they said, great, the drop-ad period ended 6 weeks ago. I said, but you know, we're talking about a Jew who was tortured to death by a consortium of government and ecclesiastical leaders, and died a humiliating public death, naked on a cross, and then, you know, was back. Still had holes in his hands and a gash down his side of the back. And, you know, I'm thinking this class can't do justice to that. I mean, here we sit, we're in a circle here, and I say something, and you say something, and I say something, and then we all go out, and we lie in the grass and look up at the trees and enjoy the beautiful campus. And I'm telling you, if you've never been honest to God hungry, there's going to be a lot of the New Testament you'll miss. If you've never been in jail or anybody you love in jail, I figured like a third half of the New Testament was written by prisoners. It's jail literature. So I'm not a good enough teacher to be able to make it credible to you. And so that same student said, I was in jail. I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, how long were you in jail? He said, for 48 hours that lasted a lifetime. And he said, I don't fear going to hell. I've already done that, okay? And I'm back. And I said, you know, I know Greek. I can read this stuff in Greek. And I've given years to mastering this literature so that I'm protected against it like mastering me. And there is a sense, though, in which you, who know very little about Scripture from what I've seen in this class, you are closer to Jesus Christ than I. Wow. The one that I answer to is looking back at me and you, and wow, I just hear Jesus say, how can you make me uninteresting? Well, thank you.